questions. So if you guys have any comments, questions?
Can the attorneys explain Chapter 2, the private housing authority and the Board of Commissioners? Correct?
Who wants to? Dennis, Don?
So Chapter 2, Crow Tribal Housing Authority. 101 is the Establishment Authority, and it describes the structure, how housing is going to be set up, and its authority under this housing under NAHASDA, and calling not calling, but designating Crow Tribal Housing as the Crow Tribal Designated Housing Entity, and that's kind of a federal term there. So that purpose of designating it as the entity is so we don't have several of them operating for the same funding, so we pick one that receives the funding. Also, there's language in there that gives an organizational structure as to setting up housing board commissioners, how and what their authorities are. And I did get a suggestion from one of the other meetings that we should probably include some type of organizational chart so that we can actually see how this looks. And I think that would be a great place to put that. And it also talks about how an authority can delegate some of the duties, but it doesn't really explain it right there. It says that it should be outlined here and there in the ordinance. So from time to time we might see a delegation. 9-2-102 Board of Commissioners. This example here was drafted to have the appointment of the commissioners done by the representatives of the districts. And so I think we're already kind of going down the road of having the Board of Commissioners appointed according to the process that Senator Alden laid out a few minutes ago. And I just wanted to reiterate that unless the people want different, I guess we're kind of leaning to having the chairman appoint the commissioners and then have the legislatures confirm those positions. With the other example, there's also, which we operate or should be operating under the current ordinance, which is electing them. All of those options, I believe, are up to the people right now, and that's kind of what we want to garner from these meetings. But I'll just say from what I've observed through these last few meetings, it appears that we might be moving towards having the chairman appoint and the legislature confirm them through the confirmation process. According to these qualifications that you see under 19-2-103. So before I move there, I just wanted to reiterate that how you want this board picked, I believe, is up to the people. And so if you're comfortable with the appointment process, I would, you don't care, you want them elected.
My question is there like two separate groups here, like a housing authority and then a commission?
Right. So the way this would be set up is kind of how it is now. Your actual department is the housing authority with your director and staff. The Board of Commissioners is like the housing board, except their duties and how they're picked are going to be, could be quite different or somewhat different. So, and like I said, if we have a chart that kind of outlines that would probably be more helpful. I didn't know if I answered your question,
No.
but your suggestions would be helpful at this point, because I know that there's a lot of general language here, Your answers to the questions won't be very apparent, and I've noticed that in these last meetings, and I would like to make sure that we're not going to have any confusion, and that when we say something in this ordinance, it's clear and understandable to the reader.
The housing, the commissioners, are they responsible for deciding who gets houses if they're built?
That came up in the other meetings. It's not outlined in this ordinance. Under the section of legislative review of administrative rules, that's under 19-2-107, and probably would go into, well, the section before at 106, it kind of outlines what the, it's the rulemaking authority, sets up the regulation. So at the outset, it appears that they're going to set the ground rules for how folks would be selected. However, that's heavily regulated by federal law also. So we would have to start with that, the federal law, and then any additional rules and regulations by the board. We haven't really discussed whether or not that's going to be an appropriate duty of the board itself. Some of the people think that that's wise. Other people think that if it works in conjunction well with the housing staff, then we can have a well enough process. But they do have a administrative review of that determination, I believe. So if it's not clear as mud, we're going to try to get there. Is that something that you would like to see?
I don't know, because it seems like whoever's on the board gives houses to their relatives.
Yeah, it sounds like they have a lot of authority.
And some of the people that are on the board, it seems like they get a couple of houses, not more than, more than one house.
Right, and I was just mentioning earlier that, that political interference, conflicts of interest is a couple of the reasons, one of the bigger reasons also why we need a new ordinance, because we know that exists under the current scheme. So if we have some other language in here, or more strict, more enforceable language in here that prevents against that, we certainly are hearing that out and need to put that in there, because it definitely is a conflict of interest and self-serving if that is in fact occurring.
Did you have any other comments like that?
Oh yeah, and like I said, that was one of the biggest reasons why this has to be amended. And this is a kind of a difficult legal concept I don't want to get into entirely, but I'll tell you, the problem as I see it is we have a housing entity that's organized under the executive branch pre-2001 Constitution. So it doesn't conform to a three-branch government where we have the checks and balances. So for example, one of the processes we have is having the chairman appoint somebody, but yet having the legislature question that person, find out about their background, see if they're qualified, and then confirming them. So see how we kind of have a balance there? Mm-hmm. Now let's say under this ordinance, we also have a judicial review, which is at the end. My thinking is that the more we have a check and balance on that, on those problems, the more transparent it'll be. So for example, if, evictions was another big one. If you're getting evicted, you should have an opportunity to do an administrative review. You should have an opportunity to go to court. That's my personal opinion. And I say that because I used to represent people in evictions, and I think you should have the utmost due process of that. So that balances and it functions really well under a 3-branch system. Whereas under the old system, it was all top-down authority is what they call it with the old, I say IRA, but it was never an IRA, but it's still the same kind of model where it's chairman, department, board, and the entity itself, so it's all in one line.
One time, the housing authority were directed by HUD that they had to evict certain individuals for non-payment of the home or because of striking in the home. And at that time, a lot of those complaints were filed with the tribal court, but the hearings were never held because the judge refused to hear the case because he didn't want to deal with eviction.
You know, I thought about that when we were going through a lot of these issues. Let's say we legislate this and then they don't follow it. They're not doing what they're required to do. And so I think the legal team and the leadership here, we're going to have to go down that road and see how we can make sure that these things are being enforced. Because if for example, under that scenario, if the judge isn't holding hearings, then what do we do? The housing board, the housing staff has a big complaint right now with the evictions. And they'll follow the entire process, try to get somebody evicted, you know, rightfully so. And you'll get a political interference from the top. You'll also see what I've heard, and you know, and I'm saying this is my observation, this is what I'm hearing at the meetings. There's folks that are not paying rent and still allowed to stay, while you have these other folks that pay rent very faithfully. And so how do we enforce that? The board and I believe the director are somewhat frustrated with that because of that interference anyway. I would say that that's one of the biggest reasons why we want to have this ordinance passed, is so that we can have a balance of that authority. And I know that, you know, Dennis and I have kind of gone back and forth on this issue. We want to have a housing authority that can function with a really good foundation and that can move forward without the political interference. But at the same time, we want to have accountability and transparency. And so there's a very fine line walking down that without micromanaging or interfering with what they're trying to do, but yet at the same time supporting them, and public trust and confidence can remain there. So we do have a lot of work to do on this ordinance, but again, like I said, you know, if the appointment of the board, I think we're kind of leaning to appointed by the chairman and then confirmed by the legislature. That seemed to work well with all of our other boards, but again, like I said, this is a housing ordinance. This is a ordinance for the people, and ultimately we should leave that decision up to the people also. So I guess I'll hand it back to Pat.
Questions? More?
I have a
Jeff?
question for her. I don't really know who you are. I'd like to know who you are as far as your title, so that in case that we would like to know when we need to get a hold of you, we need to talk with you about something that may be going on with our home, our family, who can we talk to amongst you people?
Okay, so back up a little bit. My name is Dawn Gray, and I apologize for not going over that background. I am new to the Crow tribe. I believe I started in October 1st of 2014. I'm enrolled Blackfeet from Browning, Montana. I finished law school in 2003, got my state bar license for Montana in 2006. I recently took the Crow Tribal Bar exam and passed this last summer. Prior to coming to Crow, I've represented a number of tribes in Wyoming, Nevada, Montana. More recently, from 2010 up until now, I've served as a judge across the High Line. I haven't served in any of those capacities, like down south here. This is my first job down south, and it is tribal attorney. Housing really interested me for a number of reasons, because I did take a case back in, I was presiding on a case in Browning in which there was a number of houses that were affected by mold, and I'm trying to remember the number. I think it was 142. Back in the 70s, they built those HUD homes. They were treated with arsenic, the wood foundations. Housing decided that they would pick that style of foundation at the kind of oversight of HUD. And so moving forward to today, a lot of the residents filed a class action lawsuit in the federal courts and in a parallel case in the tribal court. And federal court pretty much dismissed all of the claims based on sovereign immunity. I heard the part with the responsibility of the Tribal Housing Authority, and ultimately ruled that I think they were responsible for that, and at a minimum they should have at least built these folks new homes. However, the case didn't get too much further, and I believe the language was, a lot of that language in the housing ordinance and the way the federal scheme is set up, the tenants or the folks that were the home buyers at that time really didn't have a remedy. And so when the higher level housing authority officials take their position and abuse it, I really didn't like how that left the people. A lot of those folks believe that they got cancer from that. Their houses deteriorated to a point where they couldn't even live in them anymore, even though they paid them off. So, like I said, and then I represented folks in evictions also. I've seen a lot of overreaching by housing officials, and you know, a lot of our tenants out there don't have access to legal help. They don't understand what's happening to them, and so, you know, my thinking is it's a public service, a public program for our individuals to have housing, but yet at the same time, the process that's being dealt to the individuals it's not good. It doesn't serve them.
So you're saying that that house is substandard? That
Yes.
were issued?
Yes.
So then the correction was that they would be given a new home?
Right.
They were given the new home, but yet it still ended up with that house having the black mold or whatever down the road, and here they were without a home that was safe for them to live in.
Right.
So where did they go?
The case is still status quo. No
How
help.
long ago was this?
The decision that I gave came out in 2011, and I believe in 2012 HUD, well, actually I think it might have been the same year, they were allowed to get out of the case because of sovereign immunity.
That's what they.
Yep. And I
It was more or
believe,
less
yeah.
out in the cold.
Yep, and I totally disagreed with that because I felt somebody should be held responsible. What a great loss. Even the housing authority itself, I mean, I said, you guys could at least put these homes, these folks as priority for the next set of houses. But I believe in 1996, the HUD program ended. So they weren't really, the mutual help, was it? That ended, so you couldn't really go out and, you know, get a house built and then, you know, go through the process of owning it. So, and that question, you know, for this area, how do we get houses out here? you know, there's several different types of projects that, you know, we can endeavor upon. However, there's limitations to those. Sometimes they're controversial, but I think, Dennis, do you want to talk about that?
I had another one.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Another thing is too, okay, if you want to build units here or wherever it may be, we have this power line that comes right through the area where we live at, Bighorn Valley. We pay so much to that property for that electricity, right?
Mhm.
Why haven't we utilized some of our own energy and our resource right here on this reservation? Have you done that in the Blackfoot Reservation as far as your solar, wind, whatever it may be?
And I'm a little biased here, but I think that's probably the poorest example, because what a better place to put windmills. But
It doesn't have to be that huge windmill, because you know
Right.
the science has changed a lot of that to a smaller, more shaped, funnel shaped, like a cone.
right.
It's a lot different than it used to be.
Well, the council up there pretty much shot down the bigger idea because of the transmission line. The infrastructure to set it up was going to be too costly. But in more recent years, I've seen a lot of those windmill projects go up around there. So it's definitely feasible. I think with power projects like that, especially right now under this political scene, renewables has become a really hot topic in Indian country, and I know that the rancherias in California are probably leading in that area. Even some of the communities up in Alaska have some new technology that's going on up there also. So it's definitely possible. Whether or not we're endeavoring upon that, I guess, is a question with your leadership.
See, why I mention it to you is you go to the parades and you see these solar energized
Mhm.
on top of the buildings.
The
of a lot of
panels?
these government houses.
Right.
That is there. Why isn't it that we, as wards of the government, why haven't we received any of this yet? Why do they leave us out? When it comes to these kind of things that are going to be less costly to us, which we bring out of our own pockets, and that cost, if I'm on a fixed income, I have to worry about that every month. We don't like that name, Mr. Bill, because he comes to us every month and he wants that handout every time. Coming up tax time now we got to worry about that. So those kind of things are what I'm kind of concerned about. And now that you're looking at this new reappeal of this housing authority, you got to think above that.
Right.
What is there that we can look at that will service our community as well as, you know, balance it? You're talking about fairness as well as balance.
Right.
You can't take that family out of that home, and they got children that are living in that
Right.
home.
Right.
You
And
can't push them out because they need to live there. They got to pay the bill, that person. A lot of these guys that are here that I know of are retired. They're all on a fixed income. Some of them are from the mine, some of them are from the Bureau, Police Department. Some of them are on medical disability. So we're on fixed incomes. And we got to look at these kind of things that are confronting us in our future. We want to make things much easier for us as elders and better for the children too, the same way. And that's all I got to say about that. I'm sticking to it.
thank you.
Not forced company.
Thanks, Jeff. Just another thing to look forward to on that issue is the hydro project that we got planned here. That's something that's new too, so maybe that's something we can look at with housing and what your suggestions is now.
I have one more question on that. Okay, these guys are going to be putting in this treatment facility, which is just down the road here. Is that going to be service for every one of us? Is that going to be every one of us that is going to be paying for that service? Or is it going to be that non-Indian who's going to be paying for that service? How much is it going to be fair to each party?